to Versus Character Card!
What's up and welcome to Versus Character Cards, the Versus show without the verses. In this series, instead of analyzing two fighters to figure out who wins in a fight to the death, we are only covering one character at a time, researching who they are and what they can do, kinda like a respect thread in video form, or a versus cheat sheet, as you could use the research in this video as a base for your own research in your own versus show. Pretty neat, huh? And be sure to stay tuned after the video so you can see who we are covering next, but today, it's Dr. Neo Cortex from Crash Bandicoot. Originally for this show, I had never planned to do more than one character per series. Most of the series I enjoy tend to have a single character that can round up the verse pretty well versus-wise. But I've been in a crashy mood lately, and Cortex has a different enough skill set that's worth talking about anyways. So, rules schmools. Let's begin.
But be careful what you wish for, young man.
Back off, Grandpa!
For your wish will come true.
Dr. Neo Periwinkle Cortex, yes that's his full name, was born into a family of famous circus clowns who loved performing and making people laugh. But Cortex preferred other things, like evil science-y things, which led to him getting bullied by other circus workers, having a big giant N for nerd tattooed on his forehead. Don't worry though, karma has his back as a freak quote-unquote accident exploded the entire circus, including his family, freeing him up to pursue his scientific dreams. Thanks to extra education at Madame Amberly's Academy of Evil and help from one of his assistants, Embryo, he was able to create the Evolve-Array, a device he intended to use to create an animal army to help him take over the world, but instead created his worst enemy, Crash Bandicoot. So, to undo this mistake, he's gonna need to pack a punch. And surprisingly, he does. Unlike most evil scientists in video games, Cortex isn't afraid to get into the fray and throw hands himself, instead of just hiding in some evil robot car or floating egg. Nope, Cortex will hop on his hoverboard, float around you, and try to shoot you down with his ray gun. He has standard plasma shots that he can rapid fire or charge, but the charged ones can be reflected. His gun also has a love setting, a torch people setting, and an insta-kill setting, as well as a paralysis setting for freezing opponents for long periods of time. And in Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, he got a new setting that allows him to transform enemies into objects. He can also throw bombs and drop timed landmines, and increase his own physical capabilities with Mojo, turning him into a giant hulking monster that can create shockwaves by slamming the ground, or fire projectiles with a spin. Offensive moves aren't the only thing in his skill set though, he also has plenty of defensive options. The first is the ability to generate shields which can block out and even repel physical attacks. He can fly around with rocket boots and dash to evade enemy fire. And then finally, he has an extremely unique teleportation move, where we can actually see him as he's traveling to where he teleported to, remaining intangible and invulnerable the entire time. Since Crash is allowed to bring in Aku Aku to most of his debates and character analyses, it would be quite unfair of me to leave out Cortex's own wooden boss, Uka Uka, who has all the same powers as Aku Aku. This includes the ability to shoot beams and other projectiles, the ability to create explosions, and of course, possession. He can teleport Cortex wherever he needs to go, and gather up all his strength to open up dimensional rifts. Yeah, they're not playing around. When you're going up against a mutated super soldier Bandicoot, you can't afford to hold back. Especially when you consider the fact that this mutant Bandicoot was tough enough to casually survive a crash landing to Earth worth at least 1 megaton of TNT. But don't worry, Cortex can scale as he trades blows with Crash all the time, and even took hits from his stronger older brother Crunch, who is stated to be able to crush mountains and demolish entire cities. Cortex himself even survived getting sucked into a black hole. But, considering nothing else in the entire series even comes close to this height, and this is the only incident something like this happens, it's an outlier. I'm only bringing it up to show that despite being constantly portrayed as weak and scrawny, Cortex is just as powerful as the protagonist that pummels him. Now, speed is the category that Cortex actually leads in when it comes to the Crash Bandicoot series, as he's dodged bullets, lightning, and lasers at point-blank range. And if you play his story in Crash Nitro Kart, he's able to outrace Emperor Velo, a galactic speedster who outranks nitrous oxide, who can travel the planets at light speed. Cortex himself is no stranger to space travel either. With a ray gun in hand and no need for a robot army, Cortex is ready to take down any mutant. The Doctor is in.
Bye-bye, Bandicoots!
Time for the conclusion segment. In conclusion, Dr. Neo Cortex is really tough. Unlike most platforming villains, Cortex doesn't rely on a huge army of enemies or robots, or some gigantic complex mechanism. If he sees the opportunity to strangle his marsupial mistake, he's going to take it, whether it leads to him being the final boss, or the first boss, or somewhere in between, or being multiple bosses in the same game. In my previous show, I had Dr. Cortex take on Dr. Eggman from the Sonic series, and Cortex came out victorious. But that was quite a while ago. I may need to look back into it to see if it still holds up. Then there's also Professor Membrane from Invader Zim. He has a few tricks up his sleeve too. Maybe he'd be a good match for Dr. Cortex. People also say Dr. Nefarious from Ratchet & Clank, but I think the latest entry in that series has pushed him way out of Cortex's league. It ain't even close. But let me know what you guys think. What do you think of all the Cortex matchups I mentioned, and do you still think Cortex beats Eggman? I'll be sure to read your responses, and I'll see you guys next time. Now, let's see who's next.
Next time on Versus Character Cards, it's Jables and Cage from Tenacious D.